let's say I'm an NEMT business. I do wheelchair trips. I get a no-lift NEMT device, and now I can do stretcher trips, and I can do them with just one person instead of two people.
Correct. Yeah.
Amazing. Welcome back to NEMT Experts. I've got an interesting guest with us today. I've got Travis Draney, the creator of No-LIFT NEMT, which is an innovative new way to transfer patients from bedside to wheelchair and back and forth. Travis is going to tell us all about it. How you doing, Travis?
Good. How have you been?
Rocking and rolling. Good to see you again.
Good to see you again since NEMT, and yeah, a couple phone calls we've had.
Yeah. I am excited to share No-LIFT NEMT with the audience. You have this great 2-minute video that demonstrates what No-LIFT NEMT is and how it works. It's gotten a lot of hits on YouTube. I'm going to be sharing that link in the description of this video. But Travis, why don't you go ahead and just tell us, what is No-LIFT NEMT?
So No-LIFT NEMT it's an innovative process that makes transportations easier for transport providers. It also makes it safer. So it is an implementation of a system to allow you to accommodate wheelchair or gurney scheduled patients into a device that will that it's more dignifying than a standard wheelchair or gurney. And it can be used with one person, other than a lateral transfer. Lateral transfers are always required by two people, but it can be used in any wheelchair accessible vehicle. So you're taking out the complication of a standard wheelchair and how to secure and do a patient assessment on these patients that are in standard wheelchairs. But it also takes away the intimidation of operating a gurney, makes it a lot easier.
So what you're saying is there are certain types of transfers that normally would be done with a gurney, but if you use No-LIFT NEMT, you don't actually need the gurney.
Most of these patients that are bedbound max assist, they lack the trunk control to hold themselves up in a standard wheelchair. So some of the complications with providers right now is because of the cost difference between a wheelchair and a gurney. A lot of times they're being downgraded to a wheelchair. And so transport providers have to show up, and you have to train your drivers to kind of do a patient assessment to say, can we safely transport this patient in a standard wheelchair? And you've got some red flags you can look for. Usually it's like a gel cushion, the patient slouching. If you've got like a Hoyer sling underneath the patient, all those could be red flags that this is a max assist, bed-bound patient, wheelchair-bound patient, or they don't have that trunk control. So your next option is to go to a gurney. Sometimes you'll show up to do a gurney transport, and these patients can stand up, they can sit on a gurney. Most of them can sit up. They don't have to lay flat. Like, gurneys are originally designed for EMS, military, really emergency or extracting these patients. But we have adopted gurneys because standard wheelchairs aren't cutting it for these types of patients. And these patients are falling out of wheelchairs. And so that liability turns to the transport provider. So what No-LIFT has done is we can perform a lateral transfer by putting a patient into a reclining and positioning wheelchair that happens to be crash tested, which we could talk about why that's important. And then you can sit them up and transport them. One of the interesting things with healthcare, one of the riskiest transfer you can do in healthcare is a stand and pivot transfer, especially for these fall risk bedbound max assist patients, because they're falling or they don't have the strength to hold themselves up, and if they fall down, that could hurt themselves and it could hurt the transport provider or the healthcare provider. So to be able to perform a lateral transfer once they're in the bed and then sit them up into a wheelchair, it makes the process a lot easier. It reduces some of that risk that's involved.
And Travis, you highlight this really well in this 2-minute video that shows how it works. I mean, just to give like a little tidbit of it, you're taking what essentially is a wheelchair, you're bringing it next to the patient's bed in the hospital, and you lie that wheelchair flat. And then you're essentially sliding that patient who's lying down, sliding him from the bed onto that flat sort of stretcher / wheelchair. And then you bring that stretcher up, and it's like they're in the wheelchair.
Yep.
You don't have to lift them to get them onto the wheelchair, hence no-lift NEMT.
Yep.
It seems like such a basic, no-brainer concept. This is a relatively new sort of innovation that you've come up with, right? Can you tell us the story behind it?
Yeah. So I started in 2009 as a transport provider. And again, going back, we had 4 Decana lines. We had where they were set up to where you could do a side entry lift, wheelchair in the front, and then out the back, you could do a gurney. Well, some of the problems that we had with those is that, we had to send 2 people because we never knew if we had a wheelchair or we had a gurney. And these patients were falling out of these wheelchairs. They would unbuckle themselves. Drivers would cut corners and load patients in wheelchairs facing sideways. Or there was miscommunication between the employees operating the gurney. We've also had patients that would shift their weight during loading and unloading, which makes it very difficult to stabilize that gurney when you're loading and unloading. So we had these injuries and accidents, and me as the operations manager, safety manager, I was just like, how can we do this better? And so I went on a hunt and went searching for a better way. And I came across WC19 and what that meant. Now, WC19, it's a crash testing standard. So just like your vehicle seats that you drive in or an infant car seat, those have to go through a crash test. And it's the law. Infant car seats are the law, and it's the law for us to wear a seatbelt. But WC19, what that means is that you have a crash-tested wheelchair that's designed to be secured in a vehicle. And so I found this and tried to implement this chair, but had a couple of complications. When you were talking about that lateral transfer and watching that video, one of the things that is difficult is performing that lateral transfer, especially for heavier patients. If the patients happen to be a little wet or sticky, or if there's bed rails that don't remove or the bed doesn't go up and down, that can make the lateral transfer complicated. So with no-lift, we also implemented a roll board that reduces the patient's transfer weight by 50%. It bridges any gap in between the chair and the bed, and it also reduces shear and friction. Healthcare workers love to hear that phrase, shear and friction, when it reduces that, because that's a problem in healthcare also, especially for these patients that are laying on beds for long periods of times. They have hot spots, they have wounds, they have different things that can cause complications or problems in the transfer. So in my experience trying to figure out how to implement wheelchairs and gurneys and how to train the employees, I came up, if you look at OSHA, there's 3 ways to improve a risk or a hazard. Number 1 is administrative, which administrative will be training, policies, procedures, protocols. That's the first step. Can we train the employee and set up systems on how to use this equipment? Your second one goes to engineering. So if you can engineer a safer solution or safer opportunity or safer way to perform a task, then you can do that. And the last one is PPE, personal protective equipment. You're just protecting the employee. So with no-lift, we also come up with a solution that involves training and equipment to make it easier to perform that task for employees.
Awesome. And correct me if I'm wrong here, but like the biggest liability in doing, a trip for one of these kinds of patients is literally moving the patient from the bed onto the wheelchair or whatever it is, because, that's where the greatest risk is of the patient falling over or whatnot. Is that like the critical point that you have to protect most?
That is one of them. So with transport providers, and there's indications of this because our insurance just keeps climbing higher and higher. There's a few reasons why that's happening. Vehicles are getting more expensive. They're more difficult to repair. But another part of that is there's an inherent risk when you put a patient into a vehicle, especially when it's patients that are aging. They're having a difficult time maneuvering, walking. So there's risk with them ambulating. And then there's risk with them being in the back of the vehicle, especially in a standard wheelchair. So the transfer, going back to the healthcare providers, the riskiest transfer they can do is a stand and pivot transfer. The lateral transfer can also be a risk. It can be a risk to the transport providers that are performing that transfer, especially for heavier patients. These patients aren't getting lighter. Some of the hospice patients can be light, but a lot of the patients that we're called to transport are heavy patients. So yes, when you have a heavy patient in a bed, trying to get them from one piece of equipment to the other, and they're bed bound or max assist, there's quite a few injuries that can occur there. And so this mitigates that risk.
How long has no-lift NEMT sort of really been out there in the market?
So we started launching. This was so much fun to get this out there. When I saw the opportunity with my own operations, and I implemented this system in my own operations, I saw the benefits for the patient, for the transport provider, and for the healthcare providers. And then I saw the clinicians and the case managers seeing the value of what this could do to accomplish the tasks that they have to get patients to appointments or get them to discharge. And so when I implemented my first operations, I wanted to really test it out because it was kind of just, we still had standard wheelchairs, and that's difficult to remove because of complications that standard wheelchairs have when you show up and a patient's already in a standard wheelchair, and the complication with gurneys. So we still did all three levels of service, no lift wheelchairs and gurneys. But I really wanted to test this out and remove barriers. So I started my own transport company with the goal to 100% implement this chair. I can't say we've done 100% to implement it, but we're about 90%.
90% is a lot of percent.
Yeah. And so once I saw that and I tested it with my own company, and I wanted to really prove this concept, I started to launch and to sell these. So we started launching these and selling these in 2017, 2018. And then, COVID hit in 2019. And so it was a little slow going at first, but it's a new concept that it's a lot of fun as for a transport provider to take this to their facilities and show this chair. We've got a lot of success stories on building relationships with a piece of equipment that's like a show and tell. Sometimes it's difficult to remove barriers when you show up and knock on someone's door trying to get an agreement or to offer a service that when they have other service providers. This removes some of those barriers. To take this piece of equipment in there in the system and show them what we can do, builds relationships, and it's really an experience to see it. And you can kind of see a little bit of that in the video. One of my favorite parts is when I get ready to transfer a patient. I believe that a nurse CNA should be present during a transfer. And so what we try to do is we get those nurses or CNAs involved in that transfer. And when they see how easy that board works and how easy that chair sets up and we can perform that lateral transfer, we get a lot of aha from the nurses, like, wow, this is great. This is awesome. We need one of these. It just makes it easier.
So not only does it help you actually transfer the patient more safely, more quickly, but it actually helps you get more business with the facilities as like a marketing tool. You mind if I just go ahead and share a screen and show the device on your website really quick?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
So this is essentially the device, right?
Yep.
And you've got a little explainer and pictures of the process underneath. I mean, this is like one critical part of the process where, you know, the patient's lying here on the bed and you essentially slide them over to this thing, this device as it's flat. And then you bring up the back, which basically turns it into a wheelchair.
Yep.
That's like the critical piece of it. And again, this video, it just explains it so well. I think this is like, you know, sort of a no-brainer once people sort of learn, like, wow, I can do these trips that used to be stretcher, but now I can just do them in a device that essentially is, you know, a hybrid that turns between a wheelchair and stretcher, and I don't have to lift the patients. Travis, can you share, like, you know, for the viewers watching this who are like, hey, I'm interested in this, you know, where do I learn about the pricing? How do I get one of these things? What do they need to know?
Well, once you visit the website, you have an opportunity to book a phone call or a meeting with me. And so what I like to do is, with my experience and my background, one, I want to make sure you have the training that you need to implement something like this. But even before that, I want to understand your operations. There are so many different layers to non-emergency medical transport. There may be companies that just do ambulatory transport. Some just do wheelchairs. Some do gurney. And so I really want to understand your operations now, or where you want to take your operations. And then from there, that's where I can talk about, you know, what's going to be the best solution for you, how to implement, how to grow it, what type of vehicles to have, what type of training to get, what type of employees to hire. You know, with NEMT, like I said, there's all these different layers. We really need to peel that back to understand where you're at.
And broadly, like, you know, if you're an NEMT business that does wheelchair or stretcher, like, at no-lift NEMT, you know, can be hugely beneficial to you.
Yeah. If you're one of the biggest values with this system is, if you're a wheelchair provider already, it's a turnkey solution. So if you're not offering gurney transports and you want to, you already have the vehicle set up. So, I mean, most providers, if they want to do gurney, they have to get a designated gurney vehicle, and they have to get the gurney and then get the training to implement that gurney. So with this system, you can use it in any wheelchair accessible vehicle. Now, some wheelchairs work better than others. So that's what I help work through these transport providers, of establishing what vehicles they have, what service they want to operate, how easy this is going to be to implement. But this is one of the most cost-effective ways to get into that higher level of service, like gurneys.
So tell me this. Let's say I'm an NEMT business. I do wheelchair trips. I get a no-lift NEMT device, and now I can do stretcher trips, and I can do them with just one person instead of two people.
Correct. Yeah.
Amazing.
A lot less intimidating. And if we found this experience where we've transported patients before, and we took a survey through some of the patients that have been transported on a gurney before, and they've been transported with our system. And because it's so much more dignifying, they would rather be transported with this system than on a traditional gurney or even a power gurney. So there's some value there. It's just, we need to walk them through, and that's what I do. I consult transport companies. I'm not just selling them some equipment and a solution. I want to help them successfully implement that into their operations. And that's what we've been able to do so far, and want to continue to do.
Can you share some stories of that, stories of NEMT businesses that have adopted this, and, you know, how things have changed for them?
Yeah, I had a provider that called me. He was just doing ambulatory trips, and he wanted to get into wheelchair trips. And he was looking for a safer wheelchair because he saw how unsafe standard wheelchairs were, kind of the problems that were involved. And, you know, got him the chair, and worked with him, consulted with him. He's got, you know, he had 0 wheelchair vehicles, and that was probably in 2018. And now I believe he has 6 vehicles, and he actually has gurneys as well, but he has our system. So there are providers that will still opt to use a gurney. Like my sales pitch is that we can do 95% of gurney scheduled trips with this system. Gurneys are still very much needed. But anyways, this provider, 6 vehicles operating, he's doing a great job. And we have several other providers throughout the United States. We've sold over 250 chairs throughout the United States since COVID.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Is it largely like word of mouth? Like, wow, this works great for me, and it just spreads?
A lot of it's the video, putting that video out there and seeing that video. I've reached out to many providers through LinkedIn and Facebook and just said, hey, take a look at this. Would this help you in your operations? It got pretty big with how limited I was to help so many providers. So I actually started the Facebook group, NEMT, Non-Emergency Medical Transport. And it's now one of the largest Facebook groups. So it's awesome to see different people like yourself, providers, exhibitors that are on there, helping, coaching new transport providers that have been around a long time. That's one of the avenues that, I'm just limited to helping everybody I can, but that group's been a lot of fun to build and put together and see the connections.
Yeah, I look at that group every week. I think it's like one of the biggest groups of NEMT providers to share info. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And then we haven't even talked about NEMTAC. That's where we met up. But NEMTAC is since NEMTAC started, I've been on the advisory board with NEMTAC, working with them, trying to improve standards for NEMT. Back in the day, I always referred to NEMT as the wild, wild west. It's like there's anything goes, and you see so many different things, and there's and I think that also affects us insurance wise when someone's putting a gurney in the back of a minivan that's not even wheelchair accessible, or we see some crazy stuff out there. So that's the value of NEMTAC, is we're trying to create standards. We're trying to create training that will improve the industry, because it needs some help, but it's growing very fast too.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we can get people onto the right processes, as it grows, so we can grow the right way. And I've seen your devices at the NEMTAC conferences. I've been hearing about NO-LIFT NEMT almost since we started Bambi 2 years ago. And it's really inspiring to see, the kind of innovation in this space that is really a game changer. I mean, can you share with us a bit about like actually constructing this device?
Well, I didn't come up with the chair itself. The chair was there. It's pretty much set up and designed for long-term patient care. So it's typically a custom-built chair for an individual that needs long-term care. Most wheelchairs are. And so when I got a hold of this chair, I wanted to make it for multi-person use. So I reached out to the manufacturer and secured an agreement to implement this chair for transport providers. And I use my experience to build a training program, consulting program around how to implement this chair. And doing this in my own operations was crucial to make sure that if someone calls and says, hey, we've got this obstacle, how do we overcome it? I may not have all the answers, but I've got a lot of experience that I can walk them through how to overcome some of those obstacles.
Yeah. Awesome. Travis, this has been inspiring as usual. I really hope that more people learn about NO-LIFT NEMT, because it just makes sense in every which way, financially and safety wise. Any sort of final thoughts you want to leave our viewers with?
No, I appreciate your time today. And, technology, what you're doing on the technology side is amazing. It's very much needed. So it's cool to see, technology, how that's evolving, engineering, how it's evolving, training, you know, people that get into the NEMT space, there is a passion that's shared here. It's hard to get out of this industry once you've gotten into it, especially when you're dealing with the patient care bedside part of this. I just hope that the industry continues to go in the right direction. And I believe that, my vision is we've got to replace some of these standard wheelchairs, and gurneys aren't always the solution to transporting these patients. WC19 really has changed that. There's other features with the chair that I'd love to talk about. One of them is tilt in space. It's a function that allows the chair to tilt back, like most standard wheelchairs like this, but this chair will allow you to tilt it back, allowing gravity to pull the patients back into the chair. I can send you some pictures on that. But no, this has been a very fulfilling part of my life, being able to care for those who can't necessarily care for themselves. Like, this is customer service at its highest. You go to a restaurant, yeah, you can get customer service, but I can also go cook my own food. This is taking care of people that don't have the means of caring for each other or caring for themselves. So yeah, good.
Yeah, totally. Let me ask you this, Travis. When people hear about no-lift NEMT, they're curious, and you're sort of explaining to them, like, what do you think the biggest hesitations are for NEMT businesses in going through the process of figuring out whether they want to adopt no-lift NEMT?
Yeah, it's a new concept. It's a new idea. It's kind of this paradigm shift where you've got to get behind it and understand it. Reimbursement is a big question I have. What do you bill for this type of device or this type of service? So that's something I work with providers to do. Bigger operations that are operating gurneys, how do they implement something like that? Those are some big questions I have. We're as of right now, insurance, Medicare, Medicaid, other than through a broker, they don't really pay for transport. There's secondary advantage plans, HMO, PPO plans that usually take on that responsibility. So those can also be some obstacles. All of those obstacles, I try to help them overcome. We also now have some financing options that we've come across too. That's another obstacle, is financing the equipment to implement it, to see that return on investment. So we've got some of those solutions now also.
So, sort of maybe a obvious answer to this question, but do you see a world in which no-lift NEMT becomes the primary way to handle wheelchair and gurney patients across the country?
I can see how it could become that way. I would love it. Right now, WC19 is a standard. It's not a law. It really needs to become a law. But there's, when a patient has their own wheelchair and that's what they prefer to be transported in, there's some ADA guidelines that we need to overcome that prevent us from putting them into a safer chair. I definitely think if you're a transport provider and you have a foldable standard wheelchair sitting in the back of your vehicle, and that is your go-to device when you get a wheelchair patient, the patient's not in a wheelchair, I would think twice about that. That's not the safest equipment. Some of these chairs, they call them transport chairs. They're maroon, blue. If you look at those chairs, they will say on them, not intended to be transported in a vehicle. So that's something I would take a serious think about. It's hard to purchase a piece of equipment like this if you're just implemented to do wheelchair transports. One of the biggest values is that this allows you to do gurney transports as well. So it's a really all-in-one piece of equipment. So I would love it. I think it could get there. There's just some obstacles we have to overcome.
Yeah. And like you mentioned, NEMTEC, the industry association, is playing a big role in making those standards and breaking down those obstacles. And you've been an advisory committee member of NEMTEC for a while now, and
Yeah, since it started.
Power to you.
Thanks. It's been fun. It's been again, this is the industry it's hard to get out of. There's a shared passion that's here, and you see it. You can always tell those that are in this industry to make a difference and those that are in the industry just to make a buck. And making a difference, it needs it. We need those types of people in this industry that are here to make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Travis, thank you so much.
What's the story behind Bambi? What made it come? What'd you make come up with that?
Yeah, so my co-founder Charles, his mom thought it could stand for Better Ambulance Intelligence. We didn't think people would make that connection, but we just liked that it was a short and cute name that people would remember.
Yeah.
So we just went with it.
I'm a big hunter. I like to hunt, and I love this Bambi concept and idea, but absolutely run, Bambi, run.
We want Bambi to survive.
And Bambi does survive.